Hello, hello. The day has finally arrived for real for me to chat with Dr. Rebecca Ray on the topic of radical courage and self-kindness, or living with radical courage and self-kindness. We've done a couple tech tests, and I love it how people will pop on and say hello even during those tests. That's so much fun as we're preparing for the real deal. And because it's often necessary. Sorry, my fingers might be in your way, but I'm just going to turn on something here. I have to turn on a permissions thing, so I'm going to block the camera here for a sec. Okay. I need to be able to see if when Dr. Rebecca or Beck joins me, and then I can bring her on, and we will get going. And she's here, so we will bring her on. All right. I'll introduce her and a little more about her work, and we will dive on the topic.
Hi, Krista.
Hello.
Sorry, just covering Matt while I get everything set up. And hold on, I've got to get my tea.
Sure.
Okay, I'm ready.
So everyone, this is Dr. Rebecca Ray, and can we call you Beck?
Yes, of course.
Okay, because you sign your emails with Beck, so I feel like maybe
Yes.
that was okay. Just check.
Absolutely,
All right.
absolutely.
It took a while, like we planned this a bit in advance, so I'm really happy to finally be here. It's the day, and I get to ask you all sorts of good questions. And we get to give away a copy of your newest book, The Art of Self-Kindness. Yes. Hi, Kathy. So I'm really excited about that. I don't have a copy to show you guys because I ordered mine, but it hasn't arrived yet. So I was lucky enough to receive a digital copy to read in advance while I'm waiting for my hard copy to arrive. So I'm noticing that, can you hear me okay? Because for me, your picture is a little bit laggy.
This is just going to be the problem, I think, with doing something live. So it'll be an exercise in acceptance. Everything's fine.
Okay, so the audio just chopped out. So, okay, can you guys hear, does Beck's picture seem fine? Like, I'm okay if it's blurry as long as we can also hear her. So Giovanna and Kathy, do things seem okay at the moment from your end, that we could have a conversation and you'll be able to capture it? We saw it got some thumbs up. Okay, we're getting some thumbs up, so I feel like other people are doing okay right now. So, Beck, are you hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll just continue. Oh yeah, okay, Giovanna says you're frozen. So we resolved one tech issue to tumble into another. And I think I heard you say that this is a practice or a lesson in self-acceptance and all of that. And I agree. And I think it's partly why I love the lives. It's like, there's no pretending that we're perfect here. This is like, we're going to roll with it, whatever.
Yeah.
Okay. I will let people know that if we're not able to resolve make it so you can really hear and that we can have like a proper conversation, we'll figure it out. We'll do a separate Zoom call or something and we'll publish it for you guys. Okay. So just because this is real life and we're using the technology available. So we'll do our best to get it into your hands. All right. So, Dr. Rebecca Ray is a writer, speaker, and clinical psychologist, and you live in Australia, right? Okay, you said yes, I think. And I took this from her website, that she invites and supports finders and seekers of an expansive, inspired life. And she doesn't know this, but hers is one of my favorite Instagram feeds. And I'm a big follower. Like, it's one of the ones that I look at all the time because it is like motivational quotes or inspiring quotes, but it feels real to me. It's like the stuff that I'm practicing and I'm walking out, and the reminders are very healthy for me. So
Thank
thank
you.
you for being
That's
here,
so
Beck.
nice. Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So I will be referring to my notes, everybody watching. Sometimes I kind of spin off a little bit more, but I really want to, I have some specific questions I want to touch on. So I will be just peeking down at my notes on occasion. But here we're going to just dive on in. And then at the end of the interview, or near the end, we'll talk about the book giveaway. But for now, after lots of hard work and practice in my own life, learning, I like to say I've learned to put down deep, hardy roots of self-awareness and self-compassion. But that wasn't when life was easy. That was through lots of valleys and dark places and struggle and all of that, that I actually came to this place of self-compassion. I feel rooted now, and when I think of being rooted, I do envision a tree with these deep roots so that if the storms come, I might bend, but I can flex without breaking. I feel pain, but it's not going to destroy me. I actually would like to know, how did you arrive here? And so feel free to share as much as you're comfortable about your personal journey and how you arrived at this place where you're talking about radical courage and self-kindness.
Oh, there are so many, I guess there are so many arms to that question that I'm not even sure which one would be the most relevant. But I guess if we're talking about pain, I was a child with big feelings, and I thought I might grow out of that. I was really hoping that I might grow up into an adult that had all my feelings compacted away into a nice, you know, kind of little doable, workable bottle. But it's not like that. I'm still an adult with very big feelings, and that means that when things have happened to me, and I have a history of trauma in my childhood, and there have been events in my adulthood that have literally, at least figuratively, literally in terms of the level of pain, broken my heart. And because of the work that I do, I think I was naturally drawn to my work as a psychologist because I've always been interested in helping people, or understanding how we process our pain, understanding how we process our suffering in order to be able to move forward into living how we exist in this human life without getting paralyzed by suffering. And I mean, I didn't have to go very far to work out that suffering was definitely going to be a feature of mine. And I've come to a place where I feel it's not at a level where I now get clinically depressed or clinically anxious, even though shades of those things might show up every now and again. But I can move through the suffering without becoming captive to the suffering. And I think what's led me here to this place has been a very strong pull to observe other people on their path and learn from them and share what I know about being on my path so that we can walk each other home.
I love that. And I've noticed that you've used that term on your site. Like, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but that idea of walk each other home or walk alongside each other.
Yeah, definitely walking alongside. I don't think I directly quote, is that a Rumi quote or it's a Ram Dass quote? Yeah, that one's not mine. I don't own walking each other home, but I love it.
Yeah. But that idea, so everybody here, it's getting a little bit better. I think I'm just going to try to continue the conversation, and then I'll listen to it after too, and I will ask Beck if she's willing to just jump on a Zoom call, and so that you can be here and not worry if it's imperfect, and because in case you do miss little bits of the conversation. but I was able to I think hear everything, and it that like even right there, like I'm just like, okay, I'm hungry. Like this is exactly what I need, and this is what I've been learning, is this idea of like I used to, all my feelings and the weight of it, it was sinking me. And I've needed to learn that it's not that the suffering is even bad, it's that I need to learn how to process or how to move through, and even move through and choose joy, and even move through suffering and have a vibrant, beautiful life. That they're not separate, they can coexist.
Yeah.
Um, so Okay, and then let's see. How can people listening, do you think, how could you break this down and say, how could somebody listening come to being their own best friend? Is that even possible to say, here are your starting points, or here are a few ideas where you could practice?
Yeah. Look, I have a caveat there, Krista. I did not choose that byline on my book. I don't like it.
Okay.
I think I have the same issues with this idea of being your own best friend as I do with the term self-love. And that's that
Okay.
it can be incredibly overwhelming if you've had a tenuous or a testy or a critical relationship with yourself, to jump to this idea of, oh, I might be able to be my own best friend, or I'm going to walk a path of self-love. Instead, I prefer to come from a place of self-kindness and self-compassion. I prefer looking at things like, let's take a friendly approach. Let's just start there.
Okay.
Let's just start with a place of gentleness, rather than having to create this destination of, I have to love myself or I have to be my own best friend. So the language, I know I'm being very pedantic, but the language that I choose to use is conscious around, can we be friendly towards ourselves to just create a little bit of room to move there, particularly if you're coming from a place with yourself where you haven't been friends with yourself for a long time.
Yeah. So anytime we invite gentleness into the conversation, I'm on board. Um, so I actually really do appreciate that very much, and see how people can get overwhelmed with the gulf between where they are and where they want to be, and it feels
Yeah,
completely impossible. So it sounds like
yeah,
you're just offering some more light and hope. Um, and I love that. And by the way, she's referring to the book that we're going to offer in the giveaway, the Art of Self-Kindness, an invitation into the power of being your own best friend. And as I've learned, because I have lots of friends who've published, we don't always get to choose our own titles and all the things. We're not in control of
yeah.
all details. So thank you so much for kind of bringing some more clarity. Um,
Can I
well,
just
let's
clarify
start
in
with
case
it.
sorry, I was just going to say, if I can clarify though,
Sure.
my experience of putting this book together was so supported and so
Good.
beautifully created by my publisher that it was, the term best friend was the only thing we didn't meet together with. And they chose it from a
Okay.
sales perspective, which I'm also on board with. I need to put food
Yeah.
on the table for
Yeah.
my family. But in
Yeah.
terms
Fair
of the
enough.
actual book and our meeting together of minds and of creativity, it was the most beautiful
Hmm.
experience I've had publishing so far.
Oh, good. Okay. Thanks for saying that. Yeah. I didn't want it to be yeah, there was a contentious relationship. So thanks for saying
Yeah.
so. Um, so my next question feels linked, and in the sense that like I share often in my work that I have a no bullying policy. And that means that I speak to myself with kindness. It's just a rule I made in my life about 14 years ago when I held my third child in my arms, and I realized I was no longer going to shame my body. I was no longer going to like starve my body. I was no longer going to abuse myself with words or any other way,
Mm.
because for her sake and mine. And so I drew a line in the sand, and I love the power of that. But I tell people it's like I made that decision once, but I practice daily. I have to walk it
Mm.
out daily, sometimes minute by minute.
Yeah.
And so you talked about being a person with, like, I think you said big emotions or lots of emotions. And something I've witnessed in this space of very broadly, like let's call it the self-development space or even the mindset space, is that there can be this sense that I feel like it's like judgment almost, that like if we tell the truth about our anger, our fear, our jealousy, our rage, it's almost like bad. And I have had to work really hard to come to a place where I don't numb. And if I'm not going to numb the joy, I can't. I also had to learn that I don't numb that either. I'm allowed to feel anger. I'm allowed to feel
Mm.
grief or loss, whatever. But it's like you said, when we're talking about suffering, it's like you're not paralyzed by it. So it's like I can tell the truth and I can observe the anger, the whatever, but I don't live there. I've learned
Mm.
that I can feel, I can survive it, and I can still also choose my response and move forward. And so um self-talk though is our self-talk is tangled up with this, right? It's like if we are shaming ourselves, we're not going to be able to move through. We are going to get mired in, right, the hard parts of life. And so I wonder if you have any encouragement or tips to help people not only really see why self-talk and healthier self-talk is essential to show up to life fully, to live the life we want to, but also how could they get started? You know, like sometimes people, they don't have a clear starting point.
Yeah. Yeah. First of all, I'm just going to speak to thoughts and feelings and the relationship between those two things, so that I can circle back to this, because you talked about talking about with big feelings and lots of feelings, and then we talk about self-talk. In terms of our internal experiences, those two things are inherently linked, but they're actually separate experiences.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to I'm going to draw them together by talking about our narratives that we tell ourselves about our feelings. So, for example, I was raised in a family where I was the unusual one. I have a brother, and my mum and dad are still married, and my mum and dad raised us to not feel, because unless it's pretty, or unless it's pleasant, or unless it's comfortable, or unless it's easy for the family, if you've got uncomfortable feelings, the only feeling that was acceptable to feel was anger, and the only person that was allowed to be angry was my dad. And so what happened is, when you're raised in an environment like that, you're constantly receiving messages, either tangible or intangible, that your feelings are unacceptable. And if you then start believing a narrative about that, an internal script, and you play that script enough in your head, even when you're not conscious of it, because it's messages coming from other people, then
Mm-hmm.
that can become your beliefs about the world, about yourself, and about other people. So I grew up believing that there was something wrong with me
Mm-hmm.
because I felt big and I felt a lot. Now, this is not an attack on my parents. They absolutely did the best they can, and they now come to me for advice. I'm like the family
Mm-hmm.
advice giver when someone's feeling something intense. So
Oh, that's
that,
beautiful.
yeah, they don't actually know any better. They weren't taught any better by their parents.
Mm.
And so from a self-protection point of view, all they knew how to do was to put a lid on the feelings. Now, what happens is, as we grow up, the messages that we receive as children become beliefs that we carry about the world and about other people and about ourselves as adults. And so as I had those beliefs that my feelings were wrong, I had kind of hurtled headfirst into adulthood thinking that there was a piece of me that was broken because I was a feeler. And so I've had to rewrite that narrative internally to be
Mm-hmm.
able to tell myself a different story about the fact that, because I feel deeply and intensely, I'm one of the lucky ones that gets to feel the full spectrum of human emotion. And
Mm.
not only do I get to feel all the emotions, but I get to feel them at their fullest expression. And that's the story I choose to tell myself, to help me through the times where it's not all that nice, because I don't like suffering. I can't even come at suffering and go, oh, you know, this is just part of the human experience and I'm totally okay with it. I am absolutely not okay with it. I don't like it. And I will tell myself that it's bad at the time. But when I have some objectivity, what I can do is come back and go, well, you know what? The only way that we can feel fully is to be able to allow ourselves to feel both sides of the emotional continuum. We can't have one without the other. And so how that's linked to our self-talk is it becomes about stories we tell ourselves about our experiences. And the reason self-talk is so essential is because if you're telling yourself a story that's negative about your experience over and over again, that gets wired in your mind as a belief, as something that you live into. And this can then shape your future. It shapes your perception of your past, and it definitely shapes your perception of the present. And so coming back to making it practical, I am getting there, I promise. I know this is very tangential.
I love it. Take your time.
But the tip that I would give people to start off with, and it's probably not going to be a tip that you love, people that are watching, I'm sorry, but it's the only place we can start. And that's with awareness. We can't change something that we're not aware is there in the first place. And so what I would encourage people to do is to just start with the practice of checking in, consciously checking in. Now, this is not going to be a habit that will come naturally, and so you might need to tie it to a habit that you already do. For example, you probably always brush your teeth in the morning. So because it's choosing something that you always do. Oh, look, for me, I always have a cup of tea in the morning. This is the first chance that I've had to get to my cup of tea. So if I was boiling the kettle, when the kettle was boiling, I could tie that to a check-in with what is my mind saying right now. Yeah. And as you get used to observing your mind, what that does is it gives you some distance from the chatter in your mind. Because the next big concept I want to give you is that we are not our minds. The same way that you're not your elbow, Krista. Your elbow is a part of you, but it's not you. Your mind is a part of you, but it's not you. Your feelings are a part of you, but they're not you. You are the part that is bigger than all of that can observe it all. And so by stopping and checking in with your mind and observing it, it allows you to get that distance, especially when the chatter is, you know, nasty or critical, or it's holding you back in some way, or pushing you down, shrinking you, making you small. If you can step back and say, that's just chatter in my mind, then all of a sudden it gives you a choice about how you're going to respond to that.
Yeah. I'm so on board, and I love it. And the women here who are in my groups and stuff hear me talk constantly about self-awareness, self-compassion, imperfect action. But the self-awareness, we have to start there. Like, we absolutely need to start there. There is no other way for sustainable growth, right? We can jump on a bandwagon, we can follow people's rules for a while, but we need that self-awareness. So I see so many people sending you all sorts of hearts.
Thank you. I can't see the comments, so thank you so much to anyone that's here commenting. Hi, but I can't see you right now.
Okay. And Bobette, I realized before you also told us the audio was good, so thanks so much for that message. Yeah, so the self-awareness, completely agree. Really practical tip is a check-in, tie it to a habit that's already in place in your life so it becomes easy, and start noticing what's up. And you might notice the inner chatter, you might notice tension in your body, you might notice like a lot of, it might be physical sensations or mental chatter. So
can I just say, sorry, Krista, I was just going to say there's something that I feel really strongly about that I want to add to this, because people might say, but then what? Then what do I do once I notice? Please don't think that I'm ever going to jump in here with an Instagram quote and just say, just think positive, okay? Because one of the things that we absolutely do not do in my field of psychology is try to change or control thoughts. As far as I'm concerned, that is a waste of your energy. We can't necessarily directly control what our mind presents us with. We can introduce new information. So I can encourage you to speak kindly and bravely to yourself, but we can't necessarily control what shows up in the first place. And so if
Right.
I
Yeah.
just suggest, you'll notice that if you scroll Instagram or Facebook or whatever, you don't have to go very far before you'll get some trite quote that tells you that you should just think positive. Well, that quote can go to hell, because one of the things that sets people up for is thinking that that is even possible. And about 85% of what we think every day is negative. And that's because we are wired as human beings for survival. And our minds are designed to constantly point out threat, whether that's perceived or whether that's perceived or real. And so if you kind of want to jump a step and say, but Beck, what do I do after I observe my thoughts? It's not that you change it or that you make it different. It's that you then choose, am I going to give that thought my energy right now? Is it helping me to live by my values? Or am I going to instead take some action that's directed towards my values? Because the only thing that we can directly control is what we do. Our eyes, our mouths, our arms, our legs, and our attention. It's not our thoughts and feelings that are under our direct control. So this isn't about making you think positive or feel positive. It's about taking taking action that are aligned with our values. That's really the only thing that we can directly use our energy for.
Well, then by that thought processes, though, I would say that choosing to then speak kindly to ourselves is actually an action that
Exactly.
we can choose for ourselves.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And this is your sales page, and for the art of self-kindness, and it says you're speaking to your potential reader. You're known for your generosity, but you forget to give it to yourself. And I was reading, so research around self-compassion says that women offer themselves less self-compassion than men do. They're more inclined towards generosity or compassion towards others, a little less, not huge gulf, but like a little less than men, to be willing or whatever, practiced at offering self-compassion to self. And so I'm really curious about your thoughts or your research or your work around this. Is this a genetic thing, or is this a learned trait? This idea, because we hear about women as nurturers, like I think we can see it as part of our gifting, community building, and we know, like, if you put income in the hands of a woman, 80% or something like that is likely to flow back into the community where they tend to build and support. So it's beautiful, but if we're missing the self-compassion piece, or we're struggling there, like, what is that? Where's it coming from?
I think it's more a shaping thing rather than a genetic thing. And I'm not saying this from research that's coming to mind. I'm just saying this from what I've observed over time in my clients and also in myself growing up as a female. And I have an 18-month-old son. So I'm just, as you're asking me, I'm thinking, how am I raising him? And I think at 18 months old, I probably would have had a doll that I played with already. I was pretty into dolls when I was a kid. And at 18 months, I probably would have had one already. And I probably would have been doing some caregiving behaviors to that doll already. My son has planes and trucks, and that's just what he's obsessed with at the moment. But he also has a toy dog that he likes to pat, and he likes to make sure goes to the dog bowl when our dogs go to the dog bowl, so he gets food as well. So I'm thinking, is there a difference there? And then probably what happens is, as we grow, we naturally are turned towards whatever stereotypical messages are sent to us by our significant caregivers and our educators. So that then means what's coming from them about where our nurturing is sent to. It's about, are we showing our boys to show compassion as much as we're showing our girls? And one of the things I noticed from doing my work, so the majority of my clinical practice was with military personnel and police. And so I dealt with a lot of mainly men who didn't identify their emotions very easily. And that was an incredible block for not only processing the traumatic work that they were exposed to, but also being able to recover and heal from that, to be able to create life after retiring from those positions. And so one of the things that I was very much exposed to was the fact that we don't necessarily raise men with a language for feelings. And the language around self-compassion and around nurturing is very feelings-based. If you don't raise men, so men are raised towards taking action in response to feelings, not towards talking through feelings, then they don't naturally have that as an immediate part of their lexicon to access. And what happens is when we're feeling strongly, the right side of the brain that is largely responsible for doing all creative stuff, but also emotional processing, is active. The part of the brain that makes meaning and solves problems is on the left side of the brain. It's not active at the time that we're feeling as strongly as, if you're incredibly anxious or incredibly depressed, you don't necessarily have the same access to that side. And that's also the side of the brain that has language. So I would say that it's about what we're giving to men as we raise them in terms of their own ability to put words to something. Because if you can't put words to something, how do you process it? How do you make sense of it?
Right.
And so that would be my thinking.
Yeah, and then at the same time, I think somehow teaching girls that their value and worth lies in service, and because so many women feel that they shouldn't care for themselves, it's selfish. Like, I've been challenged by a lot of women when I say that actually I'm in the center of my circle of care because I cannot give what I don't own. I cannot. I've tried it. If I'm empty, I have nothing to give. If I drown, how am I going to help my children? But I've been challenged. And so I think it's worth, like, how you were talking about self-awareness as the starting point, even for our self-talk and all of that. It's like this kind of self-awareness and grappling and noticing, where have we picked up these beliefs about our worth or identity, or, how do we prove ourselves, or how are we good girls? Like noticing is important, isn't it? If we're going to choose something to do. So I am concerned that my phone isn't charged well enough, and I may have to shift position and plug in. Unfortunately, I'll see. Okay, hopefully it won't die on me and I'll get a notification soon. Okay. So one of the things I did want to ask you about was around healthy boundaries, and so if we're talking about even self-kindness, well, that will necessitate certain healthy boundaries, right? All of us need certain healthy boundaries for various reasons. And one question I have, and I'm genuinely interested, I honestly, I don't have any thoughts around the answer. I'm wondering, how is there a clear starting point for in noticing in ourselves where we have a leaky boundary? Because sometimes what happens, what I find is it's only when I'm in the thick of I'm annoyed, I'm resisting, there's a problem, and then I'm like, okay, now I have enough self-awareness that I can wake up and be, okay, I see the problem. But can we figure this out without having to get into kind of the tension or the muck? Is there a shortcut?
The answer is yes and no. So sometimes I think, particularly as we're growing, say teens and 20s, where you're really kind of figuring your identity out, I honestly believe that we find out most of our boundaries once they've been crossed. And I'm not, let me just make a distinction for our listeners here, that we're talking about emotional boundaries, not physical safety boundaries.
Right.
So most of the time in self-development, when we're talking about boundaries, we're talking about emotional safety and resource boundaries in terms of energy, time, that kind of stuff, not physical safety, because those boundaries are obvious for most of us, unless you have a history of trauma, in which case they might be a bit blurred. But in this conversation with emotional boundaries or resource boundaries, a lot of the time as we're growing older, we find out about those boundaries once they've been crossed. Now, if the boundary has been crossed over and over again, and you're noticing a pattern that, again, you're annoyed with Mary because here you are giving up part of your weekend to help her at the cake stall when you don't particularly want to be there. But you said yes again. It's not Mary's fault. She asked. You're the one that said yes. And if you've been doing it for 12 weeks and you're thinking, I'm definitely not doing it next school term. No way. I'm not doing it. I don't have time. And Mary comes to you at the end of the school term and says, oh, Krista, I wouldn't be able to do this without you. You have just been amazing this term. Could you help me next term? It would really make a difference to the school. And you say, oh, sure. And then you get home and you're beating yourself up. Then yes, self-awareness will play a part in what role you're playing to keep that going, to bring up that problem in your life over and over again. But for boundaries that we don't necessarily know we have, they have to be crossed before we actually know that they're there.
Okay. And how much, like, do you feel that, because I feel like one part of self-awareness can be listening to our bodies, and often we're not tuned in, and so we might have, like, for each of us it's different, but one person might notice a sensation, a gut that we can learn to identify, that's my no signal, or that's my take some time to consider before agreeing. So do you find that that's helpful for the people in your circle of influence also, is to learn to notice what's happening in their bodies?
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess it depends on how you hear your intuition, Krista. And
okay, I'm just going to move as you talk.
Yeah,
Sorry.
sure. So I'm thinking that, so for me, I hear my intuition, but I also feel my intuition. And I feel my intuition in my gut. I can't even tell you what the sensation is. I just know that it's there. But I also hear my intuition saying no or saying yes. And I think that's something that we can cultivate by intentionally listening out for that message from our intuition. Is this aligned with my values? Is this a good use of my resources? That kind of thing. But the other thing that I would say, that's okay. The other thing that I would say to this is that it might be important to notice whether you're a person who has a bent towards saying yes or a person who has a bent towards saying no. So, for instance, a lot of women that I would see would most often get stuck in, they were saying yes too often. And so they were giving themselves over to other people's time, other people's needs, other people's stuff before they would look at, but hold on a second, what do I need from myself right now? Mm-hmm. What do I need to give myself in order to be able to have stuff left over? And they would consider what everybody else needed before they considered themselves. I'm actually the opposite. So I'm someone with very strong boundaries. So I need to be aware of when sometimes I can trip myself up and miss out on things because my natural inclination is to say no. So it's actually really hard to get me to say yes to stuff.
Because you said yes to me. I'm so glad.
I know. Yeah. Special people get my yes. And so, but that's one of the things I really need to do is I have to stop and go, hold on a second. Am I saying no because it's a habit? I'm an introvert. And so it's naturally, it comes naturally to me to go, you want me to leave the house? Yeah, no, it's not going to happen. And that means that sometimes I've got to think beyond that for the greater good and think, hold on a second, what could this bring me? And it can be something as simple as catching up with friends that I love and giving myself some outside input rather than constantly being in my own head. But for other people, it's a natural inclination to say yes first. So sometimes raising our awareness just to that alone. What is our natural inclination? And therefore, where can we bring that back so that we can make sure that our resources are being used in the most efficient and effective way possible for what we have available for life?
It's making me think, like, I have one child who we all just laugh. Her immediate instinct is no. Never.
Yeah.
Give her a day, come back, or 3 days, and it's like she'll be like, maybe, like,
Yeah.
but it's always no. So, so something that was coming up for me, which it feels really important to me, it's this idea of permission. And I've been practicing, especially over this last year, like it's been a very, very personally hot, like challenging year. And some of what I was practicing was, well, a lot of what I've been practicing is permission to just love myself well, whatever that looks like, permission to say yes to joyful, delightful things, because or to taste pleasure,
Mm.
permission to just be here right now and not have to figure out tomorrow. Like just permission in so many ways. And when you're talking, it reminds me of how the simple realization for women that you have permission to care for yourself. You have permission. Don't you think that's life changing?
Yeah, I do. And I think this idea of permission as coming from someone or something externally on the same, sorry, by the same token is paralyzing. So giving
Yeah.
permission to ourselves is a
Yeah.
way to freedom. It's a way to
Okay.
open up life. Waiting for permission to come from somewhere else is a way
Right.
to contract your life and to
Yeah.
keep it small because you have no control over that. And honestly,
Mm.
one of the things that I always think about in terms of the way that I live and the way that I help other people live when they're asking for a way forward is, do you want to give up your choice about how you're going to live this one life to someone who's not you?
Mm. Yeah. We could just pause right there. Put that across the screen. Every time I laugh, my thing is rocking, so it's like I have to stop laughing. I sorry, you guys. It's so awkward. You may not don't realize, but I'm like, I'm anyway. Never mind. You don't need my awkward details. Um, all right. So let's see. Where do I want to go? I think we have a couple more questions, and then we're going to close. Um, I wonder. eh, Okay. Okay, so forgiveness. Sorry, this is really bugging me. Oh, now I'm losing you. I'm gonna just see a quick little test and see if I can flip my phone, if it'll flip for me. Rotate your phone. You can't. No, I can't do that while I'm recording. Okay, I thought so. I've never done this before, and I'm realizing it doesn't work. But okay, so forgiveness is something that I did want to specifically ask you about. So I mentioned to you that last fall, one of my courses is called Show Up Afraid. And we talked in there, and it was impromptu, like it wasn't actually part of the core content. But we started talking about this, and it seemed like it was really powerful, like important. And we were talking about forgiveness. And depending on the circumstances, people are in situations where with their therapist or their doctors, like the professionals, they were working on forgiveness with some stuff that had happened to them. And but we were focusing on the idea of like forgiving ourselves. And even for something like being imperfect, like here I am, a messy, perfect person doing my best and realizing that, I needed to forgive myself. Or looking back at my 19-year-old self and some of her behaviors and how sad she was, but she was doing her best. And I realized I needed again to just forgive her for just doing her best with the tools
Mm.
she had. And so I don't know, let's see, I don't know if I asked you a very specific question. Well, yeah, I said, what would you like to help women see or understand as it relates to forgiveness or specifically forgiving ourselves? I'm guessing this comes up in your work.
Oh, all the time. And I think it's probably one of the most powerful concepts to talk about in terms of being able to free ourselves psychologically to create a future that matches our potential. Because so often and this is the answer that I want people to understand about self-forgiveness, so often we use hindsight as a weapon against our younger selves. We use it thinking that now that we know better, if we continue to punish ourselves in the past, that we won't make that mistake again, or that somehow we can make it better. But We can't. And all that does is erodes your sense of self-worth. It erodes your sense of being able to be a decent human. I believe most people are good and trying to do the best that they can. I should clarify this, and I read a distinction about this the other day that I love. Most people are doing what they can, not necessarily, or what they know, but not necessarily the best they can. And I know there's times in the past that I look back and go, I was not doing my best at that time, but I was doing what I could at that time.
Right.
And so it's one of those things where if you continually use hindsight as a punishment against your younger self, what kind of seeds are you offering yourself to plant right now? Because I know then that I'm afraid of my future self. If I'm right now doing this to my younger self, what's my future self going to do to me about what I'm doing right now? It becomes a situation where you fear yourself, because we are our own worst enemies most of the time. And so instead, if you come from a place of forgiveness, and let me clarify, this is not a place of indulgence. It's not a place of saying you just get away with everything and not atone for mistakes that you've made that are atonable. Is that a word?
Right.
Anyway, it's a word now. But I'm not saying that you don't take action to correct mistakes that you've made if that's possible. I'm just saying if you can't forgive yourself, if you can't stop using hindsight as a weapon and instead say, actually, what I know now is not relevant for what I knew when I was 19, then there is no way to move forward. And so one of the exercises that I do with people is to get them to write a letter of gratitude to their younger selves for everything that she's done to get you here today. Everything that she's weathered, everything that she's suffered through, even the mistakes that she's made, because she's been able to live through the shame and arrive here today to somehow have your pieces together. Even if they're not together the way you want them to right now. It was her doing all that for you to get you here right now. And so that's how I work with it. And that's how I work with it on a daily basis for myself, is the me yesterday, me when I was 18 or 19, the same as you. She did things that I would never do today. And yet I look at her and go, oh my God, you survived. Like, there is strength there. And if I knew what to do with that strength when I was that age, then I might have lived a different path. But instead, thanks to her, I know what I know now. And I'm left with this wisdom and this capacity to be able to not just survive, but turn that surviving into something stunning in terms of a life. And I can't help but be grateful for her when I look at it like that.
Yeah, it even makes me think how we develop these self-protective mechanisms because we're figuring out how to survive. And then we judge those self-protective mechanisms. But I see it as a gift. Look at how your body and your mind do their best to protect us. Like, look at that. Like, that's pretty cool. Yes, sometimes it's dysfunctional. Yes, there's things that aren't lovely, but also you look at that, because that meant you didn't quit. That meant you didn't take your life when you were in despair. That meant you took one more step forward, and it was messy, but look, you did it. And I feel like that's so powerful. And as women, we can learn to celebrate these things as opposed to judging. It's pretty cool, here we are, and we're choosing growth and healing, and that's amazing.
Yeah, I love that idea of celebration, because I think as women we spend so much time celebrating other people, but we forget to actually celebrate our own humanity and our own capacities and strengths. And even though there's imperfection within that, that's where the beauty is found. If you stop and go, whoa, actually, I did some pretty amazing things. Sometimes as adults, we don't hear that from other people, maybe ever. And so if you don't offer that to yourself, where are you going to get that from?
Hmm. Yeah, I'm getting a lot of comments. People like, yes, so powerful, so good. And a lot of these are familiar faces or names to me. And I'm so glad that you guys are here and joining us. And we can revisit your comments after. I have one final question for Beck, and it's around fear. Now, I think you talk a lot about fear. It's a common theme in my writing. I talk, though, about showing up through fear. I
Hmm.
actually really strongly dislike the message, and it's semantics, but you know how you started this off by clarifying? I think that
Hmm.
matters. Words matter. How we interpret words really matters. And, but I am not interested in messages around living fearless. I'm like, if I waited to feel fearless, I would be under the covers watching Netflix right now,
Mm.
or worse, because Netflix is
Mm.
appropriate sometimes. Um, but but I don't wait for fearless. What I learned is I had to train myself to show up through fear. I had to
Mm.
learn that stress and anxiety and fear, they couldn't actually kill me. I could I could handle them. I was capable, and I could also still show up through fear. And that distinction is has been like I'm not exaggerating when I say like life saving. Like it has been life saving for me. um
Yeah.
and and so can we tie this to the idea of radical courage? Because, or maybe you don't even tie those necessarily, but let me know if you do. Because I feel like that is radical courage, choosing to see that there's pain in my life, there's suffering, there's uncertainty, and also I am going to show up, and I am going to breathe, and I'm going to love, and I'm going to risk, and I'm going to offer my light. And yeah, what do you have to say about this?
I spend an entire module in my program, Radical Courage, talking about how the goal of fearlessness is actually impossible. Unless
Mm,
you're a psychopath or unless you have a particular type of brain injury, it's not possible for us to not feel fear. Unless you
yeah,
do something so many times over and over again that it becomes familiar, and then you can shift fear. But that's exactly what you're talking about. It's talking about doing the thing first so that it then becomes so familiar to you that the fear dissolves. There's not such a thing as fearlessness. And one of the things that I always talk about is how courage and fear show up together. You don't
yeah,
need courage to go to the shops and get milk. Oh, well, you might if you have agoraphobia, but um, one of the things that you need to think about is courage is there for a reason. It's because the thing made you feel fearful in the first place. Fear is a natural human emotion. We can't get around it. And in fact, if we did wait to not feel fear, we wouldn't be doing much at all. And so this
mm-hmm.
idea that courage is courage is the driver, but fear is just a passenger. So you conceptualize it with the idea of, fear doesn't get to make the decisions. Courage will make the decisions, but you can't get rid of fear from the vehicle.
Yeah. And see, for me too, I'm like, yeah, I think it's even illogical. And we're
Yeah,
pathologizing humanity by saying, you should even be fearless. I'm like, what? Like, I feel like no
yeah,
matter what you do in your life, you're gonna face challenges. That is real life. And,
yeah,
you have a child, like, you're not, come on. If you have a baby, there's going to be a moment where you experience fear. Like, you can't protect them from
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
So, but so for me, that shift in perspective opens up this world of freedom and possibility where all of a sudden I'm not waiting, and I can just realize, oh, like you said, like for me, fear used to be the boss. It was the
yeah,
boss. She was bossy and mean. And now she's present. She's there. She kind of natters at me, but I'm like,
yeah,
okay, I hear ya. You're trying,
yeah,
I gotcha. We're gonna be okay. I'm doing this anyway. Like,
yes, yeah. And I think that's the only way that we get things done, at least for me. Like, the only way that I've done things has been to take fear with me, to just accept
mm,
that, all right, you're going to rave on and you're going to tell me how bad it's going to be. But look, what what's my other option? Like, am I going to sit at home in my bedroom, safe, for the rest of my life, like, because that's going to result in pain as well. Quickly I'll have the pain of loneliness and boredom and stagnation. So which kind of pain do you want? For me, it's the pain of growth. I would rather feel that all the pain of growth, which is, this is hard and I can't be bothered writing it. I feel that on a daily basis. I do not enjoy writing, and yet it's my job. I love the outcome, but I don't enjoy the process. And so having to sit there racking my brain for the next thing to say drives me insane. And yet it's the outcome that I go for. And so to show up for that, I'd much rather that pain of sitting there going, I've got a blank page, this is ridiculous, I don't know what to put down, versus, well, I just won't do it because people might not like it. And so therefore I'll do nothing. And the expansiveness of my life then shrinks. And I become small, and my potential becomes small because I'm not just doing it anyway. And so for me, life, I'm essentially a professional scaredy cat. I just take fear with me the entire time, but do it anyway.
Okay, I love that, because I've never heard anybody else say that, but I tell people in my community that I'm afraid every single day. I just but I just do the stuff anyway. I've also identified that my fear voice and that inner critic are louder in the morning. For whatever reason, in the morning, I'm like, it's like, what was I thinking? Hitting send on that, like, who, blah, 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 like all the noise. And then by afternoon and by the evening, I'm like, I've got this. I'm on purpose. But in the morning, I've had to learn, like, oh, just don't believe that in the morning, that voice that will be like roaring to life and panicking.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you feel you really want people to hear?
No, I think that you've touched on all the topics that I love talking about, and I would just want people to go gently. Go, but go gently.
Oh, I love that so much. Okay. Hey, you need an Instagram meme for that.
Maybe. I do. I'm pretty sure I did put one up maybe it was a few months ago now, that just said go gently, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to tell people how they can enter the book giveaway. But first, where would you most like people to go connect with you or connect with your work?
You can find me at rebeccaray.com.au, or on all the socials. My handle is at Dr. Rebecca Ray, or one word, but the most common place you'll find me is Instagram.
Okay. Is that where you're happier hanging out? Instagram?
I prefer that platform, but it also happens to just be the place where most of my people are. So that's where I spend most of my time engaging. I do try to reduce my social noise, and so all of my energy goes into Instagram first and then filters out from there to the other channels.
Okay, yep. Okay, so I have a question for anybody watching, and I'm going to let this giveaway run for a couple solid days. So Saturday, I'm going to do the draw, and that way people have time to watch the video, the replay. But my question for you, if you want to join the giveaway, would be thinking about this idea of go, but go gently, and tying it to self-kindness. I would like you to share what is one way that you can practice self-kindness, one very specific way that you can practice self-kindness this week or over this month, whatever, but remembering to do it gently, right? We're not beating ourselves up. It's not one more task that we're failing at. So we're being gentle, we're practicing, but we do want to take action towards that, right? And so what's one way that you can practice, or you choose to practice self-kindness over the next week or so? Let us know in the comments. On Saturday, I did choose a time. So noon Mountain Standard Time, that's where I live. I'm going to choose a name just randomly, and the publisher will send you a copy of Beck's book. So thank you, Beck. Thank you so much for your time. I've been just watching you from afar and so appreciating your work. So I'm really thrilled to have this chance to connect.
Thanks, Krista. I'm really grateful for the chance.
All right. Okay, bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us and for being patient with the sketchy beginning. We'll see you. Okay. Okay, bye.
Bye.